Evelyn sat alone at her kitchen table, the faded yellow light casting long shadows across the cracked linoleum floor. Her hands trembled slightly as she folded another crumpled bill, the mundane task somehow feeling heavier than it had a month ago. At 66, the days had begun to blur into one another, each indistinguishable from the last. The ache in her knees was constant now, a dull reminder that her body was not the friend it once was. Outside the window, the afternoon sun dipped lower, and she watched as a group of children raced past the neighborhood park, their laughter sharp and youthful, echoing through the air. It wasn't bitterness that twisted inside her, but a hollow ache, like she had been left behind on the sidelines of a game she once loved playing. What if everything you believed about getting old was wrong? The words came from the television, a familiar voice breaking through the static of the evening news. Elon Musk, the billionaire entrepreneur who seemed to defy every expectation society had ever placed on age and success, appeared on the screen. His eyes were sharp, his voice steady as he challenged the idea that life's best years were behind us. Evelyn's heart beat faster. She had heard his name many times, read headlines about rockets and electric cars, but now, in this quiet, dim kitchen where she felt forgotten, his words were a spark. The interview wasn't just about technology, it was about mindset, about refusing to accept limits even when the world whispered otherwise. Her fingers paused over the bill. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The words flickered on the screen, and for the first time in months, Evelyn felt the stirring of something unfamiliar, hope. She reached for her phone, hesitated, and then typed a simple message, from a small town in Ohio, still here, still trying. The weight of loneliness was real. She knew it well. The house around her was too quiet, the echoes of conversations long gone bouncing off the walls. Her husband had died 5 years earlier, and since then, the days felt smaller, emptier. Her son, Michael, lived hours away and was wrapped up in his own life. Calls were brief, visits rarer. Friends she once met for coffee now seemed distant, their lives moving on without her. She remembered the woman she used to be, a vibrant teacher who shaped young minds, who dreamed of writing a novel, who believed that passion and purpose were endless. But that Evelyn felt like a stranger now, buried beneath years of regrets and missed chances. The clock ticked louder in the silence, each second a reminder that time was slipping away. Yet here was Elon Musk, a man who in his mid-40s was launching rockets and shaking up industries, telling the world that failure wasn't the end but a step towards something greater. His voice was not boastful but insistent, a challenge thrown like a gauntlet at anyone who believed age was a cage. When I was younger, I was told to be realistic. But reality is what you make it, he said, eyes gleaming with a restless fire. Evelyn felt a lump rise in her throat. Could she rewrite her own reality? Was it really possible to start again at 66? The idea seemed reckless, almost foolish, yet thrilling. She recalled the doctor's words last week during her annual checkup, "Slow down, Evelyn. Your body can't keep up like it used to." She had nodded, swallowing the frustration, feeling invisible in a room full of white coats and clipped phrases. It's time to accept limits, they said. But Elon Musk refused to accept limits, not on rockets, not on technology, not on himself. Why should Evelyn accept them on her life? The room felt suddenly smaller, tighter, but also charged with possibility. She turned off the TV, the image of Musk's determined face lingering in her mind like a beacon. Outside, dusk settled, painting the sky with soft purples and pinks, a quiet promise that darkness always yields to dawn. Evelyn took a deep breath, feeling the tightness in her chest loosen just a little. Tomorrow, she decided, she would try something different. Not a grand leap, just a small step, maybe a walk around the block, a sentence written in a notebook, a call to Michael that wasn't just a formality. The spark was small, fragile, but real. She was tired of fading away into the background of her own life. Maybe, just maybe, the story wasn't over yet. She glanced back at her phone, the comment box still open, a message waiting to be sent. With a trembling finger, she pressed post. Outside, a breeze whispered through the trees, carrying with it the promise of change. Evelyn didn't know where this new path would lead, but for the first time in a long time, she felt alive. And that was enough to keep going. Evelyn had always been someone who found comfort in routines. For decades, she woke up at 6, brewed her coffee strong enough to burn the back of her throat, and prepared lesson plans that would fill a classroom with curiosity and laughter. She was a schoolteacher, one who had touched thousands of lives, but now those classrooms were just echoes in her memory, faded and distant like old photographs gathering dust. The house she lived in, a modest brick ranch in a small Ohio town, felt bigger now, emptier, as if the walls themselves mourned the absence of the life that once filled it. She had raised her son here, Michael, a boy with his father's stubbornness and her own quiet kindness. But somewhere along the way, the connection frayed. Long days and late-night shifts had kept her and her husband apart until he passed, and Michael's own life, with its demands and disappointments, pulled him further away. Evelyn often sat in the living room, clutching the worn leather photo album she kept on the coffee table, tracing the edges of a picture of herself at 35, standing on the shores of Lake Michigan, a book in one hand and a smile that seemed to promise endless tomorrows. That woman felt like a stranger now, lost beneath years of exhaustion, heartbreak, and unspoken regrets. She thought about the novel she'd always wanted to write, the stories that danced in her mind during long drives and sleepless nights, but the pages remained blank. Life had a way of pushing dreams aside when survival became the priority. Her body had changed too, the stiffness in her joints, the fading energy, the lines carved deep by time and worry. Friends had stopped inviting her out. She wasn't up for it anymore, she would say, but really it was the fear of being invisible in a room full of younger faces. She often felt like a ghost, drifting through her own days, waiting for something, or someone to wake her up. The loneliness was a constant companion. Some nights, she would call Michael, and their conversations felt like walking through a fog, polite and brief, never reaching the warmth she craved. When she thought about reconnecting, the fear of rejection held her back. At 66, it seemed easier to accept the quiet than risk being dismissed again. She remembered a time when life was vivid and full of possibility, the summers teaching summer school, the late nights grading papers, the laughter shared with friends over coffee at the local diner. Those days were still alive in her heart but buried beneath the ache of loss and the slow creep of invisibility. Then there were the moments she couldn't forget, her husband's sudden heart attack, the silence of the hospital room, the funeral where time seemed to stop. The day he died, she felt like part of her had died with him, and the world grew colder and more distant. Grief was a shadow that followed her, sometimes so heavy she could barely breathe. But life had a way of moving forward whether she wanted it to or not. The house was quiet now, except for the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the hallway and the occasional creak of the floorboards. Evelyn sometimes imagined the rooms filled with laughter again, with the smell of freshly baked bread, with the chatter of visitors. But those were just memories, ghosts of a life that seemed farther away every day. Then came the nights when the silence felt unbearable. She would sit in her worn armchair by the window, watching the stars blink softly above, wondering if anyone else felt this same aching emptiness. Was she alone in this feeling of fading? She was surrounded by stories of aging as a slow surrender, to loss, to loneliness, to invisibility. The world seemed to have written the final chapter of her life without asking her permission. "Is this all there is?" she would whisper into the dark. But deep down, a stubborn part of Evelyn refused to accept that this was the end. There had to be more purpose, more connection, more meaning waiting to be found. She just didn't know where to start. That's when Elon Musk's voice broke through the haze, not just as a celebrity or tech visionary, but as a symbol of fearless reinvention. He wasn't bound by the rules that society tried to impose, and somehow, his words gave Evelyn permission to dream again. Maybe it wasn't too late to try. Maybe the story wasn't over. That day, after watching the interview, she found herself sitting in front of her old laptop, hesitant fingers hovering over the keyboard. She opened a blank document and stared at the cursor blinking steadily in the middle of the screen. The words didn't come easily, but the act of trying was itself a small victory. She wrote about her mornings, the ache in her knees, the memories that haunted her, and the glimmer of hope Elon's words had ignited. The simple act of putting feelings into words made her feel less alone. Over the next few days, Evelyn made small changes. She started walking slowly around her neighborhood, noticing the way the autumn leaves crunched beneath her feet, the smell of fresh earth after rain, the way sunlight filtered through the branches of old oak trees. The world seemed fuller when she paid attention. She sent a message to her son, not about the past or regrets, but a simple note, thinking of you today. Michael's reply was delayed, hesitant, but it came. A thread of connection began to weave itself back into their relationship, fragile but real. Evelyn realized that she didn't have to have it all figured out, she just had to take the next step. The kitchen, once a place of solitude, became a space for planning. She wrote lists of things she wanted to try, writing, walking, calling old friends, maybe even joining a local book club. Each small choice was a rebellion against the narrative of decline. It wasn't easy. Some days the weight of years pressed down harder than others. There were moments of doubt, the voice inside whispering, "You're too old for this." But every time, Elon's fearless mindset echoed in her mind, "Failure is an option here. If things are not failing, you are not innovating enough." She realized that her failures and regrets weren't chains holding her back but bricks she could build a new path from. The memories of past pain didn't have to define her future. Evelyn's story was just beginning again, and though the road ahead was uncertain, she was no longer willing to sit quietly in the background. The spark that Elon Musk had ignited was small, but it was enough to start a fire. And sometimes, a single flame is all it takes to light up the darkest room. Evelyn lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, the soft hum of the night pressing in around her. Her mind was a battlefield where hope and doubt waged a quiet war. The flicker of possibility Elon Musk had sparked inside her battled the crushing weight of years spent feeling invisible, forgotten, and too old to change. "Is it too late?" she whispered into the darkness. The question circled relentlessly, a ghost refusing to leave. At 66, she had no blueprint for reinvention. Every day, society seemed to tell her she was done, a relic of a past no longer relevant, a tired face in a world racing toward youth and innovation. Her doctor's voice echoed in her mind, "Slow down, Evelyn. You have to accept the limits your body is setting." But what if those limits were only physical? What about the limits she placed on her own heart and mind? Her son Michael's words haunted her too, practical, distant, sometimes dismissive. "Mom, maybe focus on resting. Don't push yourself too hard." To him, she was fragile and fading. But Evelyn felt a fire beneath the ash, a stubborn ember refusing to be snuffed out. The world outside her window was quiet except for the occasional rumble of a car passing by, but inside, a storm raged. She thought about the years she'd spent caring for others, her husband, her students, her son, often putting their needs before her own dreams and desires. Had she lost herself in the process? Was it selfish now to want more? Elon Musk's voice came to her again, this time from a podcast she had replayed countless times, his words cutting through the fog, "When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor." Evelyn clenched her fists beneath the blankets. That was it, she had to believe her own life was important enough to fight for, to rewrite. The inner war wasn't just about ambition, it was about self-worth. Could she deserve happiness and purpose at this stage of her life? Could she reclaim joy from the ruins of regret? The next morning, the conflict spilled over into her routine. At breakfast, she tried to mention the idea of starting a blog, a way to share her stories, her journey, maybe even connect with others who felt like her. But her voice caught. Michael, visiting for a brief weekend, shook his head gently. "Mom, blogging? At your age? Why not just enjoy your retirement, spend time with family? The words felt like a cold wind cutting through her skin. She wanted to scream, "I'm not done. I'm not invisible," but instead, she nodded, swallowing the lump rising in her throat. Later, in her doctor's office, the news was no better. "Your blood pressure is elevated. Stress isn't helping. You really need to slow down." The doctor's tone was firm but kind, yet Evelyn felt dismissed, as if her desires were frivolous, dangerous even. The world's message was clear: stay quiet, fade gently into the background, don't stir the waters. But the fire Elon had lit refused to be extinguished. Back at home, she found herself scrolling through social media, watching a clip of Musk speaking about the power of failure and the need to push beyond fear. "Some people don't like change," he said, "but change is what makes progress." Those words settled into her bones like a mantra. That evening, Evelyn sat at her kitchen table, a notebook in front of her. The pen trembled in her hand, but she wrote, first halting sentences, then paragraphs filled with raw honesty. She wrote about the loneliness, the regret, the fear of being forgotten. She wrote about the life she wanted to reclaim, the dreams she refused to let die. Each word was a battle cry, a declaration of war against the doubts that had held her captive for so long. She didn't share the pages with anyone yet, but writing made her feel less alone, gave voice to the silent parts of herself. Days turned into weeks, and Evelyn's inner conflict played out in new ways. Some mornings, she felt unstoppable, ready to take on the world. Other times, the shadows of despair dragged her back into silence. Her body ached, the world was unkind to someone her age daring to dream again. Yet each time she hesitated, Elon Musk's image flashed in her mind, a man who had faced failure after failure, who risked everything because he believed in a future beyond the obvious. Evelyn began to understand that the war inside her was not unique. It was a battle many fought, especially those society expected to fade away quietly. But she could be different. She could fight. One afternoon, walking slowly through the local park, Evelyn overheard a conversation between two women about their own second chances, a friend returning to college at 70, another launching a small business after retirement. Their stories were whispers of hope, proof that transformation wasn't just possible, it was happening all around her. That night, Evelyn picked up the phone and dialed Michael's number. Her voice was steady as she said, "I want to tell you about something I'm trying. Something new." His hesitation was still there, but so was curiosity. They talked longer than usual, and for the first time in years, Evelyn felt a bridge forming, fragile but real. The inner war was far from over, but a truce had been called. She was no longer alone in the fight. Each day became a dance between fear and courage, between old habits and new possibilities. Evelyn discovered that growth was messy and uncertain, but also deeply human. Elon Musk wasn't just a distant figure on a screen, he was a symbol of the mindset she wanted to embrace. A mindset that said, no matter the age, no matter the setbacks, the journey wasn't over until you decided it was. The night before her first blog post went live, Evelyn sat at her laptop, fingers hovering over the keys. Doubt whispered, "Who will read this? Who will care?" But she remembered Elon's words about innovation requiring failure, about the necessity of risk. And she pressed, publish. The moment the page went live, Evelyn felt a mixture of terror and exhilaration. She had stepped into the arena, knowing she might fall but choosing to stand tall anyway. The war inside her raged still, but now there was hope on the battlefield. Evelyn was no longer a spectator in her own life. She was a fighter, ready to reclaim her story and prove that at 66, the fight to matter was far from over. The morning sun filtered softly through the curtains, casting golden light across Evelyn's kitchen table where her laptop sat open, the cursor blinking patiently on a blank document. After days of hesitation, she decided to start small, something manageable, something that felt like reclaiming a piece of herself, a daily walk. Just around the block. Nothing grand, nothing that would cause her body to protest too much, but a deliberate choice to move, to step forward, to defy the stillness that had wrapped around her life like a shroud. The cool autumn air greeted her as she stepped outside, the crunch of leaves underfoot a satisfying sound. It was a simple act, but it felt revolutionary. Each step was a small rebellion against the voice that told her to slow down, to accept that age meant fading away. As she walked, Evelyn thought about Elon Musk's words that had settled deep inside her. Some people don't like change, he had said, but change is what makes progress. It wasn't about running a marathon or climbing a mountain, it was about moving forward, no matter how slow, no matter how uncertain. On her third day, Evelyn passed a community bulletin board plastered with flyers, local events, book clubs, volunteer opportunities. Her eyes landed on a flyer for a writing workshop at the nearby library, aimed at beginners of all ages. Something inside her stirred. The idea of sharing stories, of connecting with others who might be fighting similar battles, pulled at her heart. She took the flyer and tucked it into her coat pocket, a tangible reminder that the world still held places for people like her. That evening, she logged into her newly created blog, the page titled simply, Evelyn's New Beginning. The first post was honest and raw. She wrote about the loneliness, the fear of being forgotten, and the small sparks of hope that kept her going. She shared Elon Musk's challenge to rethink what was possible, to refuse to accept limits simply because others said so. Pressing publish felt like stepping off a cliff, but also like planting a flag, a marker that she was here, that she mattered. The response surprised her. Comments trickled in from strangers across the country, people who saw their own struggles reflected in her words, who cheered her courage. Some were other seniors battling despair, others younger folks inspired by her honesty. The small community began to grow, and Evelyn felt less alone in the quiet house. Encouraged by this newfound connection, she decided to attend the writing workshop. The first meeting was intimidating, a room full of faces, some younger, some older, all nervous in their own ways. Evelyn's hands shook as she introduced herself, but when she spoke about her blog and her desire to share her story, something shifted. The room listened. The group became a lifeline, a place where her voice mattered and her story was heard. Meanwhile, her daily walks grew longer, and she started to notice the small beauties of her neighborhood, the way morning dew clung to spiderwebs, the laughter of children playing in yards, the comforting aroma of fresh-baked bread from the corner bakery. Each step grounded her in the present, pulling her out of the fog of regret. The most surprising change came with her son Michael. After weeks of tentative calls and messages, he visited for the weekend. They sat at the kitchen table, the space once heavy with silence now filled with tentative conversation. Evelyn shared her blog and the writing workshop, and Michael listened, his eyes softening. "Mom, I'm proud of you," he said quietly, words she hadn't heard in years. The walls between them started to crumble, replaced by a fragile hope for reconciliation. Inspired by Elon Musk's own example of daring to dream and rebuild despite obstacles, Evelyn also began to tackle a project she had long abandoned, the manuscript of a novel she had started decades ago but never finished. Dusting off the old notebooks and typing out chapters on her laptop, she poured herself into the story, weaving in the themes of resilience and transformation that now echoed in her own life. The process was difficult, her fingers stumbling over words, memories flooding back, but each paragraph completed felt like a victory. Her blog readers followed her progress, offering encouragement and sharing their own stories of second chances. It became clear to Evelyn that change wasn't a single moment but a series of small, deliberate choices, each one a step toward reclaiming purpose and joy. One evening, as she walked home beneath a sky streaked with stars, Evelyn felt a quiet pride swelling inside her. She had changed her story, not through grand gestures, but through persistence and faith in the possibility of renewal. The doubts had not vanished, but they no longer ruled her. She was learning that age was not a cage but a chapter filled with unexpected opportunities. Elon Musk had been the spark, but the fire was hers to kindle. Evelyn knew the road ahead would still have challenges, but now she faced them with a courage she thought she had lost. She was no longer the woman who waited for life to happen. She was the woman who made life happen. And that was everything. Evelyn sat at her kitchen table, the soft glow of her laptop screen illuminating the room as the late-night quiet wrapped around her like a comforting blanket. Her latest blog post was live, sharing not just her journey but the raw, unfiltered emotions she had kept hidden for so long, the fear, the loneliness, the small victories. She hadn't expected much at first, but something remarkable was happening. The story was resonating with people. Comments appeared like small lifelines from strangers who felt seen, understood, inspired. One message stood out, from a woman named Grace, a retired nurse in Florida, who wrote, "Your words remind me it's never too late to start again. Thank you for giving me hope." Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes. For the first time in years, she felt her voice mattered, that she was part of a community bigger than her fears. The breakthrough wasn't just in the words or the comments, it was in the way Evelyn's own heart shifted. She no longer saw herself as fading away but as coming alive again. The night before, her son Michael had sent a text, "Let's talk more this weekend." It wasn't just words. It was an opening, a chance at healing. When Michael arrived, there was an awkwardness that slowly melted into something warm, tentative. Over coffee in the sunlit kitchen, they talked about everything and nothing, the past, the present, hopes for the future. Evelyn shared her writing, her walks, the small steps that had started to change her life. Michael listened, really listened, and she saw a flicker of pride in his eyes. The breakthrough was fragile but real. Later that week, Evelyn returned to the writing workshop, where she read an excerpt from her novel aloud for the first time. Her voice trembled, the old insecurities rising like ghosts, but as she continued, she saw nods, smiles, and tears from others in the room. The connection was electric, a reminder that stories had power to heal, to bridge the divides time and regret created. Inspired by Elon Musk's relentless drive to innovate and fail forward, Evelyn took a risk she never thought possible. She submitted a chapter of her novel to a local literary magazine. Days passed, each one a mix of hope and dread, until finally the acceptance email arrived. Her story would be published. The validation was overwhelming. It wasn't just about recognition, it was about reclaiming her identity, proving that she still had something valuable to offer the world. But breakthrough wasn't without its challenges. Some days, the old fears crept back in, the ache in her knees, the doubt in her mind, the whispers of "too late" that refused to be silenced. A visit to her doctor reminded her of physical limits, the slow march of time etched in every ache and creak. And yet, each time she stumbled, she remembered Elon Musk's words about embracing failure as part of progress. The breakthrough was not perfection but persistence. One afternoon, while walking in the park, Evelyn saw a young mother struggling with a stroller and a toddler. Without thinking, she offered to help, and they struck up a conversation. The woman, Anna, shared that she was struggling with isolation after moving to the area. Evelyn invited her to join the writing workshop, and a new friendship blossomed. This connection reminded Evelyn that breakthroughs weren't just personal, they were bridges to others. Her blog grew steadily, and she began receiving invitations to speak at local community centers about her journey. Standing before a group of seniors, sharing her story of fear, hope, and transformation, Evelyn realized how far she had come. The room's energy was vibrant, full of nodding heads and tears. She wasn't just inspiring others, she was giving voice to the silent struggles so many carried. The breakthrough was a ripple spreading outward. One night, scrolling through comments, Evelyn found a message from Michael's daughter, her granddaughter, whom she hadn't seen in years. "I'm proud of you, Grandma," it read. Her heart swelled. The cracks in her family were beginning to heal. At home, she framed the acceptance letter from the magazine, placing it next to the photo of her younger self by the lake, a symbol of how far she had traveled. The breakthrough was not a single event but a turning point, a moment when vulnerability and courage collided to create something new. Evelyn was breaking through the barriers of fear, loneliness, and self-doubt. She was no longer the woman who felt invisible or forgotten. She was a force of resilience and hope. And though the road ahead remained uncertain, Evelyn faced it with an open heart and a fierce determination to keep moving forward. Her story, once shadowed by regret and silence, was now a beacon, proof that at 66, life could be not just lived but transformed. The truth Elon Musk had told her was clear: it was never too late to change, to matter, to shine. Evelyn sat on her front porch, the crisp autumn breeze tugging gently at her scarf as she watched the sun dip low behind the hills. The sky was painted with streaks of orange and purple, a quiet reminder that every ending was also a beginning. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the fear, the loneliness, the doubts that once seemed insurmountable, and the unexpected spark from a man thousands of miles away, whose words about courage and change had shattered the prison of her own beliefs. She smiled softly, realizing how far she had come. For years, Evelyn had carried the weight of regret like a heavy cloak: missed opportunities, fractured relationships, the slow fading of dreams shelved too long. But now, that weight was lifting, replaced by something lighter, more vibrant: purpose. The blog that started as a hesitant whisper had grown into a chorus of voices, each sharing stories of resilience and rebirth. Evelyn's small acts of courage had woven a tapestry of connection and hope, bridging generations and breaking the silence that so often surrounds aging. Her son Michael called more often now, their conversations less tentative and more filled with genuine warmth. Her granddaughter, once a distant figure, had become a cherished presence in her life, reminding Evelyn that legacy wasn't about grand monuments but the relationships we nurture. At the local library, Evelyn's writing workshop continued to flourish, becoming a sanctuary where voices of all ages found strength and validation. Watching newcomers share their stories, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. She was no longer just a participant in life, she was a catalyst for change. The manuscript she had revived and nurtured was now finished, a labor of love and perseverance. The literary magazine's publication had opened doors she never imagined. Invitations to speak, interviews, and even an offer from a small press to publish her novel. Evelyn thought back to the night she hit publish on her first blog post, trembling with fear and hope. That act of vulnerability had unlocked a future she had never dared to envision. Her physical body still bore the marks of time, aches and creaks reminding her of limits, but her spirit soared beyond them. She embraced the truth Elon Musk had shown her: limits are often self-imposed, and with daring and persistence, they can be challenged and expanded. One afternoon, as she prepared to speak at a community event about aging with purpose, Evelyn paused in front of the mirror. The woman looking back was older, yes, but radiant with a confidence forged through struggle and triumph. "I was never too old," she whispered to herself, "I was just waiting for permission to matter again." On stage, beneath the warm lights and before a crowd of eager faces, Evelyn shared her story, not as a tale of perfect transformation but as a testament to human resilience. She spoke of fear, failure, and the courage to begin again. The audience listened intently, some wiping tears, others nodding with recognition. Afterward, a woman approached her, eyes shining. "You gave me hope," she said simply. "I thought my best years were behind me." Evelyn smiled, feeling the circle of impact widen. Legacy, she realized, wasn't about what we left behind in possessions or fame, but the light we pass on to others. That night, Evelyn sat by the window, the city lights twinkling like stars below. She thought about Elon Musk, not as a savior but as a spark, a symbol of fearless reinvention. His journey mirrored hers in unexpected ways, facing doubt, embracing risk, and refusing to accept limits imposed by others or by fear. Evelyn's life was her own rocket launch, a defiant ascent against the gravity of age and expectation. She knew the road ahead would still hold challenges, but she was ready. Her new legacy was not defined by age or loss but by the courage to rise, to connect, and to inspire. As the night deepened, Evelyn whispered a promise to herself: to keep moving forward, to keep telling her story, and to remind others that it's never too late to change, to matter, and to shine. Evelyn woke before dawn, the house still cloaked in darkness except for the faint glow of her bedside lamp. The quiet moments before sunrise had become her favorite time, a space where the world felt still and full of possibility. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and stepped outside onto the porch, the cool morning air crisp against her skin. Looking out over the neighborhood, she noticed the first hints of light teasing the horizon, promising a new day. For so long, Evelyn had feared the future, convinced that her best years were behind her, that aging was a slow retreat into irrelevance. But now, standing there bathed in the soft light, she felt something else entirely: hope. The kind that breathes life into tired bones and fuels dreams once thought lost. The previous months had been transformative. Her blog was thriving, her novel published, and her relationships with Michael and her granddaughter blossoming. But Evelyn knew this was only the beginning. Inspired by Elon Musk's vision of pushing boundaries and venturing into the unknown, she began to dream bigger. The next horizon beckoned. Evelyn decided to enroll in a community college course, creative writing, something she hadn't dared to pursue formally before. The thought of sitting in a classroom again brought butterflies to her stomach, but also a thrill of excitement. She wanted to continue growing, learning, expanding her world. The first day of class was a whirlwind of new faces and fresh ideas. Some were younger, some her age, all eager to write their stories. Evelyn felt a surge of belonging, the nervousness melting away as she shared her experiences and listened to others. Each assignment was a challenge and an opportunity, a chance to stretch her voice, to experiment with style, and to confront old fears of inadequacy. Outside of class, Evelyn's daily walks became adventures in observation and inspiration. She carried a small notebook, jotting down snippets of conversation, descriptions of the autumn leaves swirling in the breeze, the way the sun caught on a bird's wing. She realized the world was full of stories waiting to be told, and she was ready to tell them. The community writing group she helped organize grew steadily, becoming a vibrant forum where seniors and younger writers exchanged feedback and encouragement. Evelyn found herself mentoring others, her confidence soaring as she witnessed their growth. One afternoon, she received an unexpected invitation from the local historical society to give a talk on storytelling and aging. Nervous but determined, Evelyn accepted. Preparing her presentation, she reflected on her journey, the darkness she had emerged from and the light she now carried. At the event, the room was packed with people of all ages. Evelyn spoke candidly about fear, transformation, and the power of narrative to reclaim identity and purpose. Questions followed, and she engaged with the audience, sharing advice and stories. The energy was electric, the connections profound. Afterward, a young man approached, introducing himself as a documentary filmmaker. He expressed interest in telling Evelyn's story, a narrative of hope and reinvention that could inspire many. The idea both excited and terrified her. Vulnerability was still new terrain, but Evelyn recognized the opportunity to reach more people with her message. After much thought, she agreed. Filming began weeks later, with cameras capturing Evelyn's daily routines, her writing sessions, and candid moments of reflection. The process was revealing and sometimes challenging, but it deepened her understanding of her own transformation. Watching the footage, Evelyn saw not just an older woman but a survivor, a creator, a beacon of possibility. The documentary's premiere at a local festival was met with standing ovations. Evelyn sat in the audience, overwhelmed by the warmth and appreciation. She realized that her story was now a legacy, a testament that change is possible at any age. As the crowd dispersed, a familiar face appeared, Michael, holding hands with his daughter. They embraced Evelyn tightly, a family united by newfound hope. Later that night, Evelyn returned home, the glow of the evening settling softly around her. She gazed out her window at the stars, feeling a deep peace. The horizon was no longer something to fear but a promise of endless possibilities. Inspired by Elon Musk's relentless pursuit of new frontiers, Evelyn knew she would keep exploring, creating, and connecting. Because life, she realized, was not about the years behind but the horizons ahead. And at 66, with her heart wide open, she was just getting started. Despite the warmth of recent victories, Evelyn woke that morning with a familiar heaviness pressing on her chest, a shadow creeping in from the corners of her mind. The breakthroughs and new horizons didn't erase the doubts that lingered, the fears that whispered she wasn't enough, that time was still slipping away faster than she could catch it. For decades, those shadows had been her constant companions, regrets about missed chances, the pain of estranged family, the toll aging took on her body and spirit. Even now, with her blog thriving and her novel published, the inner war hadn't vanished, it only changed shape. She sat at her kitchen table, the light dim and gray outside, the laptop screen glowing with emails and comments, some hopeful, some critical. She read a comment from a stranger doubting that anyone over 60 could truly reinvent themselves, a sharp reminder of society's dismissive gaze toward the elderly. The words stung, but they also sparked something deep inside her, a defiance born from years of struggle. Evelyn thought of Elon Musk, who often spoke about failure, fear, and the courage to face the unknown head-on. When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor, he had said. That phrase echoed in her mind like a mantra. Today, Evelyn decided she would face her shadows instead of hiding from them. She reached out to Dr. Jensen, her longtime physician, to discuss her physical health openly. The doctor acknowledged the inevitable limits aging imposed but also encouraged her to focus on what she could control: nutrition, gentle exercise, mental engagement. It was a sobering conversation but also a grounding one. Evelyn realized acceptance didn't mean giving up, it meant understanding the reality so she could navigate it with grace and strength. In the days that followed, Evelyn confronted another shadow, her strained relationship with her sister, Margaret. They hadn't spoken in years, the silence filled with misunderstandings and unspoken resentments. With her newfound courage, Evelyn wrote a letter, honest and vulnerable, extending an olive branch. She sent it with trembling hands, unsure if it would be answered. To her surprise, a response came quickly. Margaret expressed remorse, shared her own regrets, and suggested a meeting. The reunion was emotional and messy but healing, a reminder that even the deepest wounds could begin to mend with openness and forgiveness. At the writing workshop, Evelyn decided to share her experience of facing shadows. Reading aloud from her journal, she revealed her fears, her pain, and the small victories that came from confronting what she had avoided. The room listened in silence, then erupted in supportive applause. Others began to share their own shadows, creating a space of collective healing and strength. Evelyn found that vulnerability was not weakness but power. Meanwhile, physical challenges remained. Some mornings were difficult, knees aching, energy low, frustration mounting. Yet, she pushed herself gently, walking despite discomfort, reminding herself that persistence was progress. She integrated mindfulness and meditation, learning to sit with discomfort rather than resist it. The documentary filmmaker captured some of these raw moments, portraying not just the triumphs but the real, gritty journey of transformation. Evelyn's story was becoming richer and more authentic. One evening, as she rested after a slow walk, she received a call from Michael. His voice was soft but sincere as he admitted his own struggles, feeling lost, disconnected, overwhelmed. Their conversation deepened their bond, both realizing that healing was a shared journey, not a solitary one. The shadows were not to be feared but understood and embraced as part of life's complexity. As autumn gave way to winter, Evelyn found solace in small rituals, lighting candles in the evenings, tending to her journal, and calling friends made through her blog and workshops. The community she had built was a source of strength and hope, proof that none of them were alone in their battles. Reflecting on her journey, Evelyn understood that facing shadows was an ongoing process, a dance between light and dark, fear and courage. She no longer wished for a perfect life free of pain but sought a life of meaning, connection, and resilience. Elon Musk's fearless approach to failure and innovation inspired her to keep moving forward, embracing uncertainty with open arms. Evelyn's legacy, she realized, was not just the stories she wrote or the people she touched, but the courage to face the shadows and still choose hope. In those quiet moments before sleep, she whispered to herself, "I am enough. I am enough. The shadows remained, but they no longer controlled her. She was free. Evelyn's phone buzzed softly on the kitchen counter, a small sound that carried with it a world of possibilities. The screen lit up with a message from Grace, the retired nurse from Florida who had first reached out to her months ago after reading her blog. Would you be interested in a virtual book club? We'd love to include you. Evelyn smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. The idea of connecting with others through literature and conversation was exactly what she needed. The world had felt vast and isolating for so long, but now, technology was bridging gaps she hadn't imagined possible. That evening, as the virtual book club convened, Evelyn found herself surrounded by faces both familiar and new, some young, some her age, all eager to share stories and ideas. The discussion flowed effortlessly, laughter and tears blending as they dissected themes of resilience, loss, and hope. Evelyn's heart swelled. This was more than a group, it was a community, a family formed not by blood but by shared experience. The connections rekindled old fires inside her, reminding her of the joy that comes from belonging. Encouraged by the book club's success, Evelyn reached out to old friends she had lost touch with over the years. One such call was to Ruth, a college friend whose name had surfaced in her journal entries. Ruth's voice on the other end was warm and surprised, filled with nostalgia and eagerness to reconnect. They reminisced about their youthful dreams and shared the intervening years' joys and sorrows. The conversation stretched late into the night, sealing a renewed friendship that promised to enrich both their lives. Reconnecting wasn't limited to friendships. Evelyn's relationship with her son Michael continued to deepen, moving from tentative exchanges to genuine dialogue. They began sharing family stories, photos, and even plans for a small reunion with extended relatives. The walls built by years of silence and misunderstanding were slowly crumbling. Evelyn's granddaughter, Emma, now visiting regularly, became a bridge between generations. They cooked together, exchanged music playlists, and even collaborated on a digital storytelling project, blending Evelyn's narratives with Emma's tech skills. The blend of past and present created something uniquely beautiful, a living legacy of love and creativity. As Evelyn's social circle expanded, so did her confidence. She started volunteering at a local senior center, leading writing workshops and organizing storytelling events. The center, once a quiet place of routine, buzzed with new energy and inspiration. Evelyn saw firsthand how shared stories could spark transformation and connection. One afternoon, while helping a newcomer with her writing, Evelyn felt a profound sense of purpose. She wasn't just living for herself anymore, she was contributing to something greater. The shadows of loneliness and invisibility that had haunted her for years were dissipating, replaced by light and belonging. Yet, not every reconnection was easy. Old wounds sometimes resurfaced, conversations turned difficult, and some relationships couldn't be fully mended. Evelyn learned to navigate these complexities with grace, accepting that some chapters end while others begin. Forgiveness and patience became her guiding principles. Inspired by Elon Musk's relentless drive to push beyond obstacles, Evelyn approached these challenges as opportunities for growth rather than setbacks. The virtual book club blossomed into a monthly newsletter where members shared essays, poems, and reflections. Evelyn contributed regularly, her voice evolving from tentative to confident, her writing a beacon for others navigating the same journey. The newsletter created ripples far beyond their circle, drawing new members from across the country. Evelyn's story was becoming part of a larger narrative, a movement redefining what it means to age with courage and creativity. One evening, after a particularly lively book club meeting, Evelyn received a surprise visit from Margaret, her sister. They sat together in the cozy living room, wrapped in blankets and sharing tea. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with understanding rather than regret. They spoke of the past and future, weaving new memories with threads of forgiveness. Evelyn realized that rekindling connections was not just about the people but about healing the self. She was learning to embrace vulnerability as strength, openness as freedom. As winter melted into spring, Evelyn felt a renewed sense of belonging and possibility. The horizons she once feared were now landscapes of friendship, family, and community. The journey that had begun with fear and isolation had transformed into one of connection and hope. Sitting on her porch one evening, Evelyn watched the sun set behind blooming cherry blossoms. She thought of Elon Musk's fearless spirit, the willingness to reach beyond limits and embrace uncertainty. Inspired by that mindset, she knew her story was far from over. There were still dreams to chase, relationships to nurture, and new chapters to write. Evelyn whispered into the fading light, "I am ready." Ready for whatever came next, armed with the strength of rekindled connections and a heart wide open to life. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Evelyn woke with a sense of quiet anticipation, the morning sun casting a gentle glow through her bedroom window. The air smelled faintly of fresh coffee and blooming lilacs, small comforts in a world that still held vast unknowns. She stretched slowly, feeling the familiar ache in her joints but also the steady rhythm of a heart ready to keep moving forward. Today was different. After months of rebuilding, reconnecting, and rediscovering, Evelyn was ready to embrace the future. Not as a fearful unknown but as an open field of possibilities waiting to be sown with intention and courage. The past years had taught her that life after 66 was not a decline but a transformation, a chance to redefine purpose and joy on her own terms. She brewed a cup of coffee and sat at her desk, the manuscript of her novel open beside her. The words on the page reflected not only a story of fiction but a mirror of her own journey, fraught with challenges but bursting with hope. Writing had become her anchor, a way to process the past and envision the future. Inspired by Elon Musk's bold vision of creating a future that once seemed impossible, Evelyn began to draft a plan, a roadmap not just for her writing but for her life. She wanted to launch a podcast, a platform to share stories of transformation and resilience from people of all ages, with a focus on those who felt forgotten or too old to change. Technology no longer intimidated her, it was a tool to connect and inspire. With each idea that took shape, Evelyn felt her confidence swell. She reached out to Grace and other members of her virtual book club, sharing her vision and inviting collaboration. Their enthusiastic responses fueled her excitement. Together, they brainstormed topics, guests, and formats, eager to create something meaningful. The technical learning curve was steep, but Evelyn approached it with determination and curiosity. She watched tutorials, practiced recording, and learned editing basics. Each small victory was a step toward reclaiming agency over her narrative. Meanwhile, her relationship with Michael blossomed into a partnership of mutual support and understanding. He helped with the podcast setup and shared insights about social media, bridging the generational gap with patience and love. Their renewed connection felt like a balm to old wounds, a testament that healing was possible at any stage. Evelyn's daily walks continued, but now they included stops at local cafes and parks where she met new friends and shared stories. Her community expanded beyond family and old friends to include artists, activists, and fellow seekers of meaning. She found inspiration in their courage and diversity. One chilly morning, Evelyn accepted an invitation to speak at a conference on aging and innovation. Standing before a crowd of curious faces, she shared her story, the fears, the setbacks, the breakthroughs, all woven with the thread of Elon Musk's example of relentless curiosity and fearless reinvention. The audience responded with warmth and applause, and afterward, several approached to express gratitude and share their own journeys. That evening, Evelyn returned home with a sense of fulfillment. The future, once shadowed by doubt, was now a canvas she was eager to paint. Her podcast launched with the first episode featuring a local artist who had started her career at 70. The conversation was lively and authentic, touching on themes of persistence, creativity, and redefining success. Listeners wrote in with their stories, and the community grew rapidly. Evelyn found joy in every message, every new voice added to the chorus. As spring turned to summer, Evelyn's life pulsed with purpose and connection. She balanced writing, podcasting, volunteering, and family with grace, sometimes feeling overwhelmed but always buoyed by the knowledge that each day was a gift. She learned to say no to what drained her and yes to what nourished her spirit. Physical challenges remained, but they no longer defined her. She adapted her routines and listened to her body, finding strength in self-compassion. In quiet moments, Evelyn reflected on the profound shift within herself. She was no longer the woman who had once thought her life was over at 66. She was a woman who had rewritten the narrative, who had embraced uncertainty with open arms and fierce determination. Elon Musk's influence was never about idolizing success but about embodying the courage to dream big, to fail, and to rise again. Evelyn's new legacy was not a singular achievement but a continuous unfolding, a life lived fully, richly, and authentically. One warm evening, sitting on her porch as fireflies danced in the twilight, Evelyn received a call from a young woman named Sarah, a listener from across the country. Sarah shared how Evelyn's podcast had inspired her to return to school after years of self-doubt, to chase a dream she had abandoned. Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes as she listened. This was the impact she had hoped for, to spark change not just in herself but in others. As the call ended, Evelyn whispered a prayer of gratitude. The future was bright, not because it was certain, but because she was ready. Ready to meet it with courage, creativity, and heart. The horizon stretched wide before her, an invitation to keep exploring, connecting, and growing. At 66, Evelyn realized, life was not a closing chapter but an epic beginning. She smiled into the darkening sky and said softly, "This is only the start." Evelyn sat at her desk, the soft hum of the evening filling the room as she stared at the blinking cursor on her laptop screen. The words she wanted to write felt elusive, slipping through her fingers like wisps of smoke. She had dreamed for so long of telling her story, of creating something meaningful, but now that the moment was here, doubt crept in again. Was she truly capable? Could she maintain the momentum she'd built? The fear of failure was a familiar shadow, one that had lingered throughout her life. But this time, Evelyn chose to face it differently. She remembered Elon Musk's words from a recent interview, "Persistence is very important. You shouldn't give up unless you are forced to give up." Those words struck a chord deep within her. Persistence was not about stubbornness or blind hope, it was about steady, deliberate action, even when progress seemed invisible. With renewed determination, Evelyn began typing, one word at a time, each keystroke a small victory over hesitation. Over the following weeks, she experienced setbacks, technical glitches with her podcast, moments of writer's block, and the physical fatigue that sometimes slowed her pace. Yet, she kept going. She developed a routine that balanced work, rest, and connection, honoring her limits while pushing boundaries. The podcast episodes grew richer, featuring guests from diverse backgrounds who shared their own stories of resilience and reinvention. Evelyn's audience expanded, with messages pouring in from listeners who felt seen and encouraged. One day, she received an email from a woman named Joan, who wrote about rediscovering her passion for painting at age 72 after years of feeling too old to start. Joan's story reminded Evelyn of her own transformation, fueling her commitment to amplify voices like hers. At the community center, Evelyn continued leading writing workshops, where participants ranged from retirees to younger adults navigating life's challenges. The room buzzed with creativity and hope, each person contributing to a tapestry of shared experience. Evelyn found that persistence was contagious, seeing others' determination inspired her own. One chilly morning, Evelyn faced a particularly difficult challenge. A close friend had passed away suddenly, stirring grief and a sense of fragility. The loss threatened to derail her progress, casting a pall over her spirits. But in that moment of sorrow, she turned to the lessons she had learned, that resilience was born not from avoiding pain but from embracing it and choosing to move forward anyway. She reached out to her support network, allowing herself to grieve while holding on to the vision of the future she was creating. Slowly, the heaviness lifted, replaced by a quiet strength. Inspired by Elon Musk's ability to persist through personal and professional hardships, Evelyn saw her grief as part of the human experience that added depth and compassion to her work. She poured these feelings into her writing, creating pieces that resonated with honesty and vulnerability. As spring approached, Evelyn decided to organize a local event celebrating the power of persistence. She invited speakers, artists, and community members to share their journeys, aiming to create a space where perseverance was honored and encouraged. The event was a resounding success, drawing a diverse crowd united by their commitment to keep going despite obstacles. Evelyn stood on stage, looking out at the faces illuminated by soft lights, and felt a profound sense of connection. The power of persistence, she realized, was not just in achieving goals but in the daily choice to show up, to create, and to believe in the possibility of change. That night, as she walked home beneath a sky full of stars, Evelyn reflected on how far she had come. The woman who once believed her life was over at 66 was now a beacon of hope and action. Her story was a testament to the truth that persistence, fueled by purpose and community, could rewrite the narrative of aging and limitation. She smiled, knowing the journey was ongoing and the horizon ever expanding. With every step forward, Evelyn embraced the power within herself, the power to persist, to inspire, and to live fully. Evelyn sat quietly on the porch swing, the late afternoon sun casting long golden rays over the garden blooming with wildflowers and fresh green shoots of spring. The gentle creak of the swing and the hum of distant birdsong wrapped around her like a soft blanket. She breathed deeply, feeling the cool air fill her lungs and the calm wash over her spirit. After months of reconnecting, embracing change, and finding new purpose, Evelyn was ready for the next step, building new dreams, not just chasing old ones or revisiting past regrets, but creating visions that sparked excitement and hope for the years ahead. The idea had taken root one evening after listening to an interview with Elon Musk, where he spoke about his relentless pursuit of innovation and the importance of dreaming big no matter the obstacles or age. He said, "You want to be extra rigorous about making the best possible thing you can. Find everything that's wrong with it and fix it." Evelyn took those words to heart. Her novel had been published, her podcast launched, and her community was growing, but she wanted to create something tangible, something that would last beyond stories and conversations, a legacy that would carry her passion forward. She thought about the old woodworking tools gathering dust in the garage, relics from a time when her father had taught her to craft small furniture pieces. She hadn't touched them in years, but now, with renewed energy, the idea of building something with her hands called to her. It wasn't just about making objects. It was about building dreams into reality, one careful step at a time. Evelyn spent days clearing the garage, setting up a small workshop space filled with light and order. The scent of wood and sawdust soon filled the air, bringing back memories of summers spent with her father, who had always believed she could do anything she set her mind to. The first project was simple, a small bookshelf for her living room, designed to hold her growing collection of journals, novels, and notes. She sketched plans carefully, measuring and cutting with a precision that surprised even her. The work was challenging, her hands were slower, and her muscles protested, but the satisfaction of progress, of creating something real, was unlike anything she'd felt in years. Word spread among her community, and soon others joined her workshop, eager to learn, to build, to dream together. The garage became a hub of creativity and collaboration, a place where age was no barrier and passion was the common language. Stories mingled with the sound of hammers and laughter as the group crafted furniture, art pieces, and even small gifts for local charities. Evelyn found joy not only in the work but in mentoring others who had felt too old or too hesitant to start something new. She saw their faces light up with pride and possibility. The act of building became a metaphor for life itself, measuring carefully, adjusting when mistakes were made, persevering through frustration, and celebrating every finished piece. Evelyn remembered Elon Musk's early failures with SpaceX and Tesla, how he had faced countless setbacks but never lost sight of his vision. She embraced that spirit, understanding that setbacks were not signs to quit but invitations to innovate and improve. One afternoon, Evelyn received a call from Michael, who had been listening to her podcast and following her new woodworking venture with enthusiasm. He suggested partnering on a project that combined her storytelling with his tech skills. Creating interactive digital books that blended narrative, audio, and visuals. Evelyn's mind raced with excitement. The idea was bold and unfamiliar but perfectly aligned with her vision of blending past and future. Together, they began brainstorming, sketching out concepts and exploring software platforms. The process was exhilarating and, at times, overwhelming, but each step brought them closer to a new dream. Their collaboration bridged generations, weaving family bonds stronger than ever. Evelyn also began writing essays about the experience of building dreams later in life, reflecting on the courage it took to start anew and the joy found in hands-on creation. These pieces resonated deeply with her readers, many of whom wrote back sharing their own aspirations and stories of overcoming fear. The new dream was not just about Evelyn, it was about inspiring others to see the possibilities that awaited beyond the limits society imposed on age. As summer blossomed, Evelyn's workshop hosted an open house for the community. Neighbors, friends, and family came to see the creations and hear stories of transformation. The event was filled with warmth, music, and shared hope. Evelyn stood amidst the crowd, grateful for the journey that had brought her here, from despair to purpose, from isolation to connection, from doubt to action. That night, as she sat under a star-studded sky, Evelyn whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude. She was building more than furniture or digital books. She was building a future, her future, shaped by dreams that were alive and growing. The woman who once thought her life was over at 66 now knew that age was not an end but a beginning, a fertile ground for new visions and bold creations. Elon Musk's fearless example had been the spark, but the fire was hers to kindle and share. Evelyn smiled, feeling the steady pulse of possibility within her. The journey was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. Fear had a way of creeping in when Evelyn least expected it, a quiet whisper at the edge of her thoughts that questioned every bold step she took. The fear of failure, of disappointing those who believed in her, of not being enough, it all lurked beneath the surface. Despite her progress, despite the community she had built and the new dreams she was pursuing, fear remained a stubborn companion. One afternoon, as Evelyn prepared to record a podcast episode about embracing uncertainty, her hands trembled slightly, and her voice caught. The topic was close to her heart, but the vulnerability required felt daunting. She paused, took a deep breath, and remembered something Elon Musk had once said, "When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor." That phrase became a mantra. Evelyn understood that fear was not a signal to stop but a signal that she was pushing beyond comfort zones, where growth awaited. She began to confront fear head-on, naming it, facing it, and refusing to let it dictate her choices. Each podcast episode became an act of courage, a declaration that she was willing to be seen and heard despite doubts. As she shared her own struggles with fear, listeners responded with their own stories, creating a ripple of shared vulnerability and strength. Evelyn realized that fear was a universal thread connecting all ages and experiences. At the community center workshop, she introduced exercises designed to help participants identify and transform their fears. They wrote letters to their fears, shared them aloud, and then symbolically released them through art or ritual. The room filled with emotion, tears, laughter, and the collective power of healing. Evelyn felt humbled and inspired by the bravery of those around her. One day, Evelyn faced a particularly daunting challenge, a public speaking engagement at a regional conference focused on innovation in aging. Standing backstage, her heart raced, and old insecurities surfaced. The fear of forgetting her words or being judged threatened to paralyze her. But she remembered Elon Musk's fearless approach to tackling the impossible and the countless times he had stood before critics and skeptics undeterred. With that image in mind, Evelyn stepped onto the stage and began to speak from the heart. Her voice wavered at first, but as she shared her journey of transformation, fear gave way to connection. The audience responded with warmth and applause, affirming the power of vulnerability and persistence. After the talk, several attendees approached, thanking her for her honesty and inspiration. Evelyn felt a deep sense of accomplishment, not because she had been perfect, but because she had chosen courage over retreat. Over time, Evelyn noticed that her relationship with fear was changing. It no longer controlled her but became a signal of growth, a compass pointing toward areas where she could expand and learn. She embraced fear as a teacher rather than an enemy. This shift was not always easy. There were days when fear loomed large, threatening to pull her back into old patterns of doubt and withdrawal. But Evelyn had cultivated tools to navigate these moments: mindfulness, journaling, reaching out to her support network, and returning to the lessons of resilience she had learned. One evening, Evelyn received a call from a longtime listener named Tom, who shared how her podcast had helped him confront his own fears about retirement and purpose. His words moved her deeply. The impact of her openness rippled far beyond what she had imagined. Inspired, Evelyn decided to create a special podcast series focused entirely on overcoming fear, featuring guests from various backgrounds who shared their journeys of bravery and transformation. The series resonated widely, sparking conversations in communities and online forums. Evelyn's message was clear: fear was natural, but it need not be a prison. As autumn leaves turned and the air grew crisp, Evelyn reflected on her journey with fear. She understood now that the path to transformation was not fearless but fearless despite fear. Each step taken in the face of uncertainty was a victory, a reclaiming of agency and hope. Sitting by the fire one night, Evelyn whispered a final truth she had come to hold close: fear is not my master. I am. Rebuilding relationships felt like walking through a fog for Evelyn, uncertain and fragile, but necessary. Years of silence and distance had settled like dust on the bonds she once treasured, especially with her daughter, Anna. Their last conversation had ended in frustration and tears, leaving Evelyn feeling isolated and regretful. Yet now, inspired by her journey and Elon Musk's example of relentless pursuit despite setbacks, she knew she couldn't let the past define their future. One afternoon, Evelyn sat at her kitchen table, the sunlight streaming through the window casting warm patterns on the worn wood. She held her phone tightly, composing and deleting messages over and over before finally pressing send. Anna, I'd love to talk when you're ready. No pressure, just a mother who misses her daughter. The hours that followed stretched long and tense. Doubt crept in: would Anna respond? Had the distance grown too wide? When the reply finally came, simple and tentative, I'd like that, Evelyn's heart soared and faltered all at once. Their first meeting was awkward, filled with pauses and tentative smiles, but it was a beginning. They met at a quiet cafe, the aroma of coffee mingling with the hum of soft conversations around them. Evelyn listened more than she spoke, allowing Anna's words to flow without judgment or interruption. Slowly, the walls between them began to lower. Anna shared struggles Evelyn hadn't known, fears of disappointing her mother, and the pain of feeling unseen. Evelyn shared her own regrets, the loneliness that had shadowed her years, and the small steps she'd taken to change. Inspired by Elon Musk's willingness to face challenges head-on and embrace transparency, Evelyn chose honesty over defensiveness. Their conversations grew deeper and more frequent, weaving threads of understanding and forgiveness. They found shared interests, a love of classic films, gardening, and storytelling, that became bridges to reconnect. Evelyn realized that rebuilding relationships wasn't about erasing the past but about creating new foundations on respect and empathy. At family gatherings, the renewed connection with Anna sparked warmth that had long been missing. Even Michael noticed the change, offering quiet support and encouragement. Evelyn reached out to old friends as well, making amends where possible and opening doors to new friendships where time had left spaces. One afternoon, Evelyn organized a small dinner at her home, inviting Anna, Michael, and close friends. The house buzzed with laughter, shared memories, and plans for the future. The evening felt like a healing balm, a celebration of second chances and enduring bonds. Yet, Evelyn knew that rebuilding required patience and ongoing effort. There were still moments of tension, misunderstandings, and fears resurfacing. But each challenge was met with renewed commitment and love. She wrote about these experiences in her journal and podcast, hoping to inspire others facing similar struggles. One episode featured a heartfelt conversation with a counselor specializing in family reconciliation, offering practical advice and hope. Evelyn's openness encouraged listeners to reach out to estranged loved ones, fostering a wave of healing messages and reunions. As the months passed, Evelyn and Anna planned a trip together, a chance to create new memories away from old patterns. They chose a quiet cabin by a lake, surrounded by trees that blazed with autumn colors. The days were filled with walks, shared meals, and long talks beneath starry skies. Evelyn felt the profound gift of presence, the simple act of being together without agendas or expectations. She marveled at the resilience of love, how it could bend and stretch without breaking. Back home, Evelyn reflected on the journey of rebuilding relationships. She realized that, like her own transformation, it required courage, vulnerability, and the willingness to hope. Elon Musk's example of bold reinvention wasn't just about business or innovation, it was a reminder that even the most broken connections could be rebuilt with intention and heart. Sitting by the window one evening, Evelyn whispered, "We are all works in progress, and love is the glue." The new bonds she was forging became her anchor and her wings, carrying her forward into a future rich with possibility and connection. At 66, Evelyn no longer feared loneliness or regret. Instead, she embraced the messy, beautiful process of healing and growing alongside those she loved. Evelyn woke early that morning with a sense of quiet excitement. The sunlight filtered softly through the lace curtains, painting delicate patterns on the walls of her small but cozy bedroom. The familiar scent of brewed coffee from the kitchen below mingled with the crisp freshness of autumn air slipping through a cracked window. She stretched, feeling the gentle ache of muscles stirred back into life after weeks of renewed activity, and smiled. Purpose. That elusive, vital word that had once seemed out of reach was now the steady rhythm of her days. Her journey from despair to action, from isolation to connection, had unfolded in ways she hadn't imagined, and yet here she was, standing on the threshold of something new, a chapter of life bursting with meaning and direction. For years, Evelyn had thought her story was nearly over, that the fading light of age had dimmed her potential. But she had come to see that purpose wasn't something waiting to be discovered in grand gestures or distant dreams, it was crafted through daily choices, small acts that built momentum and meaning. She thought back to the countless evenings spent listening to Elon Musk's interviews and talks, where he emphasized relentless focus and the importance of working toward a mission that mattered deeply. "Work like hell," he had said once, "because if you're not excited by what you're doing, you won't do it." That truth had sparked a fire within Evelyn, not the frenzied energy of youth, but a calm, determined passion born from wisdom and clarity. Her mornings now began with a walk through the neighborhood park, where the changing leaves crunched beneath her feet and the scent of pine and earth lifted her spirits. The walks were a time of reflection and planning, a sacred space where she connected with the pulse of life around her. She carried a small notebook, jotting down ideas and inspirations as they arose. Her writing had evolved from personal memoir to something more expansive, guiding others on journeys of reinvention and resilience. Her blog and podcast were thriving, but Evelyn sensed that her purpose was expanding beyond sharing stories. She wanted to create tangible change in her community, to bring people together around causes that mattered. One crisp morning, she visited the local community center with a proposal to launch a Second Act initiative, a program designed to empower older adults to pursue new careers, hobbies, and volunteer opportunities. The idea was met with enthusiasm, and soon Evelyn was collaborating with staff and volunteers, designing workshops and events that celebrated lifelong learning and creativity. She found joy in organizing speaker series, skill-sharing sessions, and mentorship programs that connected generations. Her vision was to create a space where age was seen not as a limitation but as an asset, a wellspring of experience and wisdom. The initiative quickly gained momentum, attracting media attention and funding from local organizations eager to support positive aging. Evelyn became a familiar face in town, invited to speak at events and community forums. Her message was clear and powerful: your purpose is not behind you. It is here, now, waiting to be shaped by your hands and heart. Alongside this work, Evelyn deepened her involvement in environmental causes, inspired by Musk's dedication to sustainability and innovation. She joined local cleanup efforts, promoted recycling programs, and advocated for green spaces. These efforts brought her into contact with passionate activists and young volunteers, whose energy and idealism recharged her own resolve. Evelyn marveled at the unexpected friendships that blossomed across age gaps, each learning from the other in a dance of mutual respect and shared purpose. As her days filled with activity and connection, Evelyn discovered that embracing new purpose was not about erasing past identities but integrating them. Her skills as a writer, her experiences as a mother and friend, and her resilience through hardship all fueled her current mission. Purpose was not static, it evolved as she did, a living, breathing force that adapted to seasons of life. One evening, after a successful fundraising gala for the Second Act program, Evelyn sat quietly in her garden, the sky ablaze with stars. She reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The moments of doubt, the sparks of inspiration, the courage to take risks despite uncertainty. She whispered a thank you to Elon Musk, whose fearless example had been a beacon in her darkest hours. But more importantly, she thanked herself, for choosing hope, for embracing change, for daring to believe she still mattered. Evelyn knew the road ahead would have challenges, that purpose required ongoing effort and sometimes sacrifice. But she also knew that living with purpose gave her days a richness that no amount of comfort or ease could provide. At 66, Evelyn was not just surviving, she was thriving, creating a legacy of empowerment and connection that would ripple far beyond her years. She smiled as she looked up at the sky, feeling the steady pulse of possibility in her chest. The future was hers to build, one meaningful moment at a time. Joy had once seemed like a distant memory for Evelyn, something that belonged to a younger self or to others whose lives appeared lighter and less burdened. But as she continued her journey of transformation, she discovered that joy wasn't reserved for grand achievements or extraordinary moments, it was found in the small, everyday details that made life rich and meaningful. One crisp morning, Evelyn stepped out onto her front porch, a steaming cup of tea warming her hands as the sun's gentle rays bathed the neighborhood in golden light. The scent of freshly mowed grass mingled with blooming jasmine from her neighbor's garden. She watched as a squirrel darted energetically across the lawn, pausing to nibble on a fallen acorn. That simple scene, a small creature thriving in the moment, felt like a quiet celebration of life's resilience and beauty. Evelyn smiled, feeling an unexpected lightness in her chest. She began to notice the small things more often. The crisp snap of autumn leaves underfoot, the soft coo of morning doves at dawn, the way her granddaughter's laughter could brighten the darkest day. These moments didn't erase the struggles or the challenges she faced, but they offered a balm, a gentle reminder that life still held sweetness worth savoring. Inspired by Elon Musk's attention to detail and relentless curiosity, Evelyn adopted a practice of mindful observation. Each day, she took time to engage fully with her surroundings, savoring the textures, sounds, and scents that often went unnoticed. She kept a small journal, jotting down moments of joy, sometimes as simple as the warmth of sunlight on her face or the taste of a perfectly brewed cup of coffee. Sharing these reflections on her podcast created a new connection with her audience, many of whom found comfort and inspiration in celebrating everyday happiness despite life's difficulties. Evelyn's renewed appreciation for small joys extended to her relationships as well. She made a habit of expressing gratitude to friends and family, sending notes or making calls just to say, "Thank you," or "I'm thinking of you." These gestures deepened bonds and brought a sense of mutual appreciation and warmth. At her woodworking workshop, Evelyn noticed how the act of creating something tangible, a chair, a shelf, a birdhouse, brought a special kind of joy to participants. The transformation of raw materials into useful, beautiful objects mirrored their own transformations, sparking pride and satisfaction. Evelyn encouraged everyone to pause and savor these moments of accomplishment, no matter how small. One particularly joyful day was the annual Neighborhood Harvest Festival, where Evelyn and her friends set up a booth displaying handcrafted items, homemade preserves, and fresh-baked goods. The event was filled with laughter, music, and shared stories. Evelyn's heart swelled as she watched children running with painted faces and elders dancing slowly to familiar tunes. She realized that joy was not just a feeling but a community, a shared experience that connected generations. Despite the joy she cultivated, Evelyn was honest about the coexistence of sorrow and hardship in life. She spoke openly about how joy did not mean ignoring pain but choosing to find light even in shadows. This nuanced perspective resonated deeply with her listeners, many of whom grappled with loss and change but yearned for hope. One evening, as autumn deepened and the first frost kissed the garden, Evelyn sat by her window sipping chamomile tea. She reflected on the years she had spent feeling invisible and irrelevant, and how far she had come. The journey had been hard, marked by setbacks and fears, but it had led her to a place of gratitude and presence. She whispered a quiet affirmation, "Joy is mine to find, every day, in every breath." The next morning, Evelyn decided to create a new podcast episode titled, "Finding Joy in Small Things." She spoke softly into the microphone about the power of mindfulness, gratitude, and connection. She shared personal stories, practical tips, and invited listeners to join her in a week-long challenge to notice and celebrate small moments of happiness. Responses poured in, emails, voice messages, and social media posts from people across the country sharing their own discoveries of joy. Some described watching a sunrise, others reconnecting with old friends, or simply savoring a meal. The collective energy was contagious, inspiring Evelyn to expand the challenge into a community event. The Joy Project, as it came to be called, became a movement that brought people together both online and in person, fostering a culture of appreciation and hope. Evelyn's heart swelled with gratitude. She realized that by embracing joy in small things, she was not just enriching her own life but creating ripples that touched countless others. She thought of Elon Musk once more, not just as an innovator and risk-taker but as someone who found excitement in the details, who believed that even the smallest advances could lead to extraordinary change. Evelyn understood now that joy was the fuel for resilience and purpose, the quiet force that carried her forward through every challenge. As winter approached and the year drew to a close, Evelyn felt a deep sense of peace. The woman who had once believed her life was over had found not just survival but flourishing. Joy was no longer elusive but a companion, woven into the fabric of her days. She smiled, knowing that the journey continued, rich with promise and light. Taking risks again felt like standing at the edge of a cliff for Evelyn, heart pounding, breath catching, a mixture of exhilaration and terror swirling inside her. For decades, her life had been defined by caution. The mistakes she had made, the losses she had endured, the physical challenges that came with age, they had all woven an invisible cage around her spirit. But now, inspired by Elon Musk's fearless leaps into the unknown, she felt the stirrings of boldness returning. One afternoon, Evelyn sat in her sunlit living room, scrolling through her inbox when an unexpected invitation arrived. A local startup was looking for advisors with life experience to guide their innovation in eldercare technology. The idea was thrilling but daunting. Could she step into unfamiliar territory? Would her opinions even matter? The voice of doubt echoed loudly, but then she recalled Musk's mantra, "Failure is an option here. If things are not failing, you are not innovating enough." That simple truth unshackled her hesitation. Evelyn replied with a tentative yes, opening the door to a new adventure. At the first meeting, surrounded by young engineers and entrepreneurs buzzing with ideas, Evelyn felt both out of place and invigorated. Their energy was infectious, their visions bold, and their respect for her wisdom genuine. She listened carefully, shared insights from her own life, and challenged assumptions when needed. Her perspectives brought a human dimension to their technical conversations, reminding them that innovation must serve real people, not just markets. As weeks passed, Evelyn immersed herself in the world of prototypes, brainstorming sessions, and product testing. She discovered a thrill in learning new skills, digital tools, design thinking, and user experience. The risk wasn't just about stepping outside her comfort zone, it was about reclaiming her voice and relevance in a rapidly changing world. Yet, taking risks also brought moments of doubt and fear. There were late nights wrestling with technical jargon, moments of self-criticism, and the sting of rejection when some ideas were dismissed. But Evelyn learned to embrace these setbacks as part of the process. Like Musk, she understood that perseverance was key, every failure a lesson, every challenge an opportunity to refine her approach. Her family watched this transformation with a mix of awe and concern. Anna expressed pride but also worry about Evelyn stretching herself too thin. Evelyn reassured her that this risk was carefully chosen, a step toward growth rather than recklessness. Michael, too, became her cheerleader, attending some meetings and encouraging her to balance work with self-care. Evelyn's podcast listeners followed her journey with keen interest, inspired by her courage to reinvent herself yet again. She dedicated an episode to taking risks at any age, sharing candid stories of fear, failure, and triumph. The feedback was overwhelming, sparking conversations about ageism, courage, and the power of stepping into the unknown. One particularly meaningful moment came when the startup's prototype for a wearable device designed to monitor health and mobility passed initial testing. Evelyn had contributed insights on usability and comfort, ensuring the device was accessible to seniors with varying needs. The success felt like a victory not just for technology but for human-centered innovation. Encouraged by this momentum, Evelyn proposed organizing a workshop to connect innovators with elders who could provide real-world feedback. The event was a lively exchange of ideas, bridging generations and fostering mutual respect. Evelyn's role as a connector and catalyst solidified her renewed sense of purpose. Taking risks also extended beyond her professional endeavors. She began to explore new social experiences, joining a dance class, attending local art exhibits, and even considering travel to places she'd always dreamed of visiting but never dared. Each step outside familiar routines brought a mixture of excitement and vulnerability, but Evelyn embraced these feelings as signs of growth. One memorable evening, at a community gala celebrating innovation and aging, Evelyn shared the stage with a young entrepreneur who credited her mentorship for shaping the product's direction. The applause felt like an acknowledgement not only of her contributions but of her willingness to leap into new challenges despite age and uncertainty. As she looked out at the crowd, Evelyn felt a surge of gratitude for the risks she had taken. They had transformed her life in ways she hadn't imagined, rekindling passion, forging new connections, and proving that it was never too late to chase dreams. Sitting alone afterward, she reflected on the journey from fear to courage. The leap was never about reckless abandon but about choosing faith over fear, action over stagnation. She thought again of Elon Musk's relentless drive, not to be fearless, but to embrace risk as the path to progress. Evelyn whispered to herself, "I am still learning, still growing, still daring." And in that moment, she knew the cliff's edge was not an end but a beginning, a place where new horizons awaited those brave enough to step forward. Inspiring others became Evelyn's unexpected gift, a ripple effect born from the courage she'd nurtured through her own transformation. What had started as a personal journey to reclaim purpose and joy evolved into a beacon for others wrestling with the weight of age, loss, and invisibility. She found herself invited to speak at community centers, retirement homes, and even local colleges, where her story resonated deeply with audiences of all ages. Evelyn's voice, once quiet and tentative, now carried the strength of someone who had faced fear and emerged on the other side. One afternoon, she stood before a packed auditorium filled with faces reflecting the same doubts and hopes she'd once carried. The air buzzed with anticipation as she began. "If you told me a few years ago that at 66 I'd be here sharing my story, I might have laughed, or cried. But here I am, living proof that it's never too late to change, to grow, to matter." The room responded with warm applause, a chorus of affirmation that fueled her words. She shared her struggles openly, loneliness, regret, the fear that her best days were behind her. But she also shared the turning points, the small choices inspired by Elon Musk's fearless mindset, the decision to take risks, to rebuild relationships, to find joy in small things. Her honesty created a bridge, inviting others to see themselves in her story. After her talk, many approached her with tears, hugs, and stories of their own challenges. Some spoke of fractured families, others of lost careers or fading health, but all carried a flicker of hope that Evelyn's journey helped rekindle. One woman, Grace, approached with trembling hands and a shy smile. "You've given me permission to try again," she whispered. "I'm going to start painting again after 30 years. Evelyn's heart swelled with gratitude. She realized that inspiring others wasn't about grand gestures but about showing up authentically, sharing vulnerability, and offering hope. She began organizing monthly, second act, meetups, creating safe spaces where people could share dreams, fears, and plans for reinvention. These gatherings became a tapestry of stories, laughter, and encouragement. Evelyn invited guest speakers, entrepreneurs, artists, therapists, each bringing unique wisdom and inspiration. The community grew, vibrant and supportive, a testament to the power of connection and shared purpose. Evelyn's podcast also took on new energy, featuring interviews with listeners who had embraced change in their own lives. She highlighted everyday heroes, retired teachers starting nonprofits, veterans launching businesses, grandparents returning to school. These stories amplified the message that transformation was possible at any age. Evelyn was humbled by the flood of messages from people across the country and even internationally, thanking her for being a catalyst for change. Some shared how they'd reconnected with estranged family members, others how they'd started new careers or hobbies. The impact extended beyond words. Evelyn was helping to shift cultural narratives around aging, challenging stereotypes of decline and irrelevance. Social media became a powerful tool for spreading this message. Evelyn's posts, quotes, reflections, photos of community events were shared widely, creating a virtual village of support. She occasionally referenced Elon Musk's mindset as a symbol of radical possibility, reminding followers that limitations were often self-imposed. One particularly memorable moment came when a local newspaper ran a feature on Evelyn's work, dubbing her the spark for second acts. The article highlighted her journey and the community she'd built, inspiring others to think differently about aging. Invitations followed from organizations and media outlets eager to hear her story. Yet, Evelyn remained grounded. She knew that inspiring others was not about seeking fame or accolades but about service and empathy. Each story she shared, each conversation she held, was an act of love, an invitation to believe in the power of renewal. She often reflected on a quote from Musk that had stayed with her: "When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor." Evelyn saw this not only in business but in the courage to live fully despite challenges. Her influence extended to her family as well. Anna, once distant and skeptical, now spoke proudly of her mother's impact. Michael often joined her at events, their partnership a symbol of enduring support and growth. Evelyn's granddaughter, inspired by her grandmother's example, began volunteering with the Second Act program, bridging generations and carrying the torch forward. As the seasons changed, Evelyn planned a community celebration, a festival of stories and creativity to honor the journey of aging with dignity and passion. The event brought together hundreds, featuring music, art, storytelling, and workshops. Evelyn took the stage once more, surrounded by the faces of those she had inspired and who had inspired her in return. Looking out over the crowd, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The woman who had once felt forgotten and powerless had become a catalyst for hope and transformation. She understood that inspiring others was a continuous cycle, each person empowered to ignite change in another, creating an ever-widening circle of light. Before stepping down from the podium, Evelyn shared a final thought: "We are never too old to dream, to risk, to love, and to inspire. The truth Elon Musk taught me is this: age is not a barrier, it's a platform. It's a chance to use all we've learned to build a future worth living. Let's rise together." The crowd erupted in applause, a wave of energy and commitment that echoed long after the festival ended. Evelyn smiled, knowing that her story was no longer just her own, it belonged to everyone willing to embrace change and courage. At 66 and beyond, she had found her voice and purpose, and in doing so, had sparked a movement that would continue to grow, lighting the way for countless others. The journey was far from over, but Evelyn was ready to inspire, to lead, and to live boldly every single day. Life has a way of testing us when we least expect it, and for Evelyn, just as she felt fully alive and empowered, the final test arrived, not with fanfare, but quietly, like a shadow slipping through the door. It began with a subtle ache in her chest, a discomfort she brushed aside as mere fatigue. But as days passed, the pain grew sharper, the breath shorter. At 68, Evelyn found herself in the sterile, humming environment of a hospital, the cold antiseptic smell mixing with the soft beeping of machines. The diagnosis was sobering, a serious heart condition that required immediate intervention. In that moment, the woman who had faced loneliness, fear, and invisibility now confronted her own mortality head-on. The news hit her like a wave. Would all her progress, all her newfound joy and purpose, be snatched away? Doubts surged like a storm. Was this the end of her story? Could she survive this trial? Would she be a burden on those she loved? Yet, even in the darkest hour, Evelyn remembered the lessons she had learned along the way. Elon Musk's fearless embrace of uncertainty, the courage to risk, the resolve to persist despite odds, these weren't just words but lifelines. She decided to face this challenge as she had all others, with fierce determination and an open heart. The hospital stay was arduous. Procedures, recovery, moments of pain and frustration tested her body and spirit. At times, fear crept in, whispering that she was too old, too fragile. But Evelyn fought back with every breath, drawing strength from the community she had built, from her family's unwavering support, and from the inner fire Musk's mindset had helped ignite. During long nights in the hospital bed, she listened to podcasts she had recorded herself, reminders of her own voice urging courage. She reached out to friends and followers who sent messages of encouragement, weaving a safety net of love around her. Physical therapy was grueling. Muscles weakened by illness needed retraining, energy rebuilt piece by piece. Evelyn's body, once nimble, now required patience and care. But with each small victory, taking a few more steps, climbing a flight of stairs, holding a cup without trembling, she reclaimed confidence. The process was humbling yet empowering, a testament to resilience and grace. More than the physical challenge was the emotional journey. Evelyn grappled with acceptance, accepting vulnerability without surrender, embracing help without losing independence, trusting the process without losing hope. She journaled her feelings, sharing raw honesty on her podcast about fear, uncertainty, and the power of faith. Her openness inspired countless listeners who faced their own health battles, creating a shared space of strength. Family became her anchor. Anna held her hand during procedures, Michael coordinated appointments and cared for the household, and her granddaughter visited with drawings and stories, infusing moments with light and laughter. These connections underscored the truth Evelyn had always known but now felt deeply: we are never truly alone. The final test also brought clarity. Evelyn reflected on her life's journey, its peaks and valleys, losses and triumphs. She saw how every challenge had prepared her for this moment, how the fire Elon Musk sparked within her had never truly burned out. She realized that facing mortality was not a defeat but a passage, a chance to deepen meaning and legacy. One afternoon, after a successful surgery and as she rested in a sunny hospital room, Evelyn spoke softly to her daughter, "I'm not afraid anymore. This isn't the end. It's part of the journey, part of the story we keep writing." The words brought tears but also peace. In recovery, Evelyn set new goals, not just to survive, but to thrive. She planned to return to her podcast, to expand the Second Act community, to continue inspiring others with her story of resilience. She knew the final test was not a full stop but a comma, a moment to pause and gather strength for what was next. When Evelyn finally returned home, the familiar sights and smells welcomed her, a sanctuary filled with love and hope. Her steps were slower, her body more fragile, but her spirit burned brighter than ever. She resumed her daily rituals with renewed gratitude, morning tea on the porch, walks through the garden, time spent creating and connecting. Each day was a gift, a victory. Evelyn's story of facing the final test became a powerful testament to the strength of the human spirit. She shared it with honesty and courage, reminding others that even in the face of serious illness, life could hold joy, purpose, and connection. The narrative she had built was not about denial or pretending but about embracing reality with hope and action. As the weeks turned into months, Evelyn continued to inspire a growing audience. Her message was clear. Age and illness are not the end of the road but part of the journey's rich tapestry. The fire of transformation burns on, fueled by courage, community, and choice. On a quiet evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky with hues of orange and pink, Evelyn sat with her family, surrounded by warmth and love. She reflected on the path that had brought her here, the moment she thought her life was over, the spark Elon Musk ignited within her, the risks she took, the joy she found, and the community she inspired. The final test had been the hardest, but also the most profound. Evelyn smiled, feeling a deep peace settle in her heart. "I was never too old," she whispered, "I was just waiting for permission to live fully again." And with that, she embraced the future, ready for whatever came next, knowing that the truth Elon Musk taught her was eternal: the only limits we face are the ones we accept. Evelyn's story was far from over, but one thing was certain: she would meet every moment with courage, hope, and the fierce belief that life at any age could be extraordinary. The room was quiet except for the soft ticking of an old clock on the mantel. Evelyn sat by the window, sunlight streaming in and casting golden patterns across her hands. She looked out over the garden where late summer flowers bloomed, a vibrant mix of colors and life. It struck her as a perfect metaphor for her own journey: long dormant roots, patiently waiting, finally blossoming into something beautiful and strong. At 69, Evelyn had arrived at a place she never imagined in her younger years. She had outgrown the fears and doubts that once held her prisoner. What she once saw as an ending was now clearly a new beginning. A chance to build a legacy not measured in wealth or fame, but in lives touched and hearts changed. The truth Elon Musk had told her, the truth she had discovered for herself, was simple but revolutionary: you are never too old to matter, to create, to lead, to transform. This truth was the foundation of Evelyn's new legacy. Over the past few years, Evelyn had poured her energy into the second act community she founded, a network now thousands strong, spanning cities and states. It was a place where age was celebrated as a source of wisdom and potential, not a sign of decline. Through workshops, podcasts, and online forums, Evelyn helped hundreds rewrite their own stories. One of her proudest moments came when a local college invited her to develop a curriculum on aging with purpose, blending life experience with practical skills for personal growth. Watching students, many of whom were seniors themselves, engage with the material, sharing their fears and dreams, filled Evelyn with joy. She saw a ripple effect unfolding, a generational shift in how society viewed aging. Evelyn's family remained her greatest source of pride and love. Anna, now a confident woman in her 40s, often credited her mother with inspiring her own career shift from corporate law to nonprofit leadership. Michael continued to be her steadfast partner, their bond deepened by years of shared trials and triumphs. And her granddaughter, Lily, blossomed as a creative force, carrying forward the values of courage and compassion Evelyn had instilled. Their home became a hub of activity, celebrations, discussions, and quiet moments of connection. Evelyn often thought back to the lonely kitchen where she once felt invisible, and marveled at how far she had come. In public, Evelyn became a sought-after speaker and mentor, yet she remained humble. She used her platform not to boast but to amplify others' voices, shining a spotlight on stories of resilience and reinvention. She advocated for better policies supporting aging populations, drawing on her experience and community's insights. One afternoon, after a keynote speech at a national conference on aging, a young woman approached her with tears in her eyes. "You gave me hope," she said simply. You showed me it's never too late to change. Thank you. Moments like these reminded Evelyn why her journey mattered. The legacy she built was not about herself but about lighting the way for others. In quieter times, Evelyn found joy in reflection. She kept a journal, filled with lessons learned and dreams yet to fulfill. One entry read, "I thought life was over at 66, but that was just the start." The truth is, every day holds possibility. Age is a platform, not a cage. She often revisited Musk's words that had sparked her transformation, how his vision and courage shattered the limits of what seemed possible. His example had been a mirror, reflecting her own potential waiting to be claimed. Evelyn's story even reached national media, with interviews that highlighted the power of mindset over circumstance. Yet she never lost sight of the intimate, everyday victories, the phone call to an estranged friend, the first steps in a dance class, the blog post that sparked meaningful conversation. These were the threads weaving the fabric of her new legacy. As she aged gracefully, Evelyn embraced the physical changes with kindness and acceptance. She practiced mindfulness and gentle exercise, nurturing body and soul. She surrounded herself with people who uplifted and challenged her. The fear that once shadowed her life had transformed into curiosity and excitement for what each new day might bring. One crisp autumn morning, Evelyn stood in her garden watching the leaves fall like golden confetti. She thought of the seeds she had planted, not just flowers but ideas, connections, courage. She knew that her legacy was alive in those seeds, growing quietly in others' lives. "I was never too old," she whispered to the breeze. "I was just waiting to believe it." The truth had set her free, and now she was free to set others free. At that moment, Evelyn felt a deep peace settle in her heart, a sense of completion and beginning all at once. She was a living testament to the power of transformation, a reminder that age is not a limit but a doorway. And through her courage and example, the world was beginning to see that too. Evelyn closed her eyes and smiled, ready to embrace whatever the future held, knowing that her new legacy would continue long after her. It was a legacy of hope, courage, and the unbreakable human spirit, a legacy she was proud to call her own. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?